Ambush! Rezu barked, already off his horse, sword drawn. From the trees, black cloaked figures burst forth like shadows peeled from the bark. Fast, trained, silent, turned, striking with precision. Her blade arced clean through the neck of the first assassin who charged at her. Blood sprayed in a sharp fan across the leaves. A group of soldiers emerged from the dark, leading a figure forward. The maid. "I tried to kill you," she said flatly, "and you're letting me walk away. Surely, there must be a price." "There's none." Elira took a step closer, her veil catching a thread of moonlight. "You committed treason," she said. "But your blood won't be on my hands. You have one night. Use it well. Leave the capital. Go far where no one will find you." In the throne room, power was shifting. The royal councillors had assembled once more. The atmosphere was quiet, but charged. The dais was no longer empty. Princess Selene sat where Elira should have, on the heir's seat beside the empty throne. The Minister of Rights had just placed the circlet of regency on Selene. The silver band seemed to fit her perfectly, coiling around her brow like a serpent. "The throne shall not remain vacant," intoned Lady Tavora, keeper of records and royal decrees. "As dictated by the law of sovereign continuity, the role of regency shall fall upon the next royal heir for a period not exceeding 6 months. The tension in the room was the kind that pressed against the ribs and stole breath. Selene had just admitted to the group that she was the one who sent the maid to kill Elira. The room fell silent, the only sound the soft clinking of Selene's untouched wine against the goblet. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. Across from her, Lord Makore leaned forward, his sharp eyes burning beneath furrowed brows. His voice was velvet and venom. "You sent the maid?" It wasn't a question. Selene swallowed. "Yes." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke. Lord Woober shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He dared not speak. Makore's gaze turned icy, his tone cold. "You reckless little fool." Makore rose to his feet like a wave surging over a crumbling wall, the scrape of his chair against stone, a rasp of warning. The candlelight caught the edges of his fine robes, casting long shadows that danced like daggers. His voice dropped, low but venomous. "Do you understand what you've done? I had a plan. An assassin, silent, professional, a death no one could trace. But no, you send a trembling maid with no training to commit regicide before a crowd of nobles and guards. Half of the kingdom were watching." He leaned forward, his palms planted firmly on the table, and now that maid is alive, in the dungeon. Talking is only a matter of time. Selene opened her mouth to speak, but Makore's glare froze her in place. His voice dropped even lower, each word jagged with restrained fury. "If she breaks, if she even breathes your name, you will take the fall, and make no mistake." He stared directly into her eyes, as if looking into her trembling soul. "If you fall alone. I will cut you down myself before you can lift a finger in my direction." Selene's throat bobbed, but she held his gaze. Just barely. Lord Woober let out a strangled breath, mumbling, "This is bad. This is very bad." Selene, though trembling, spoke at last, quietly, but with grim certainty. "The maid won't break." Makore's brow lifted, skeptical. "Oh, and you're suddenly an expert in torture resistance?" Selene pressed on, voice steadier now. She knew she would be captured. We planned for that. Lord Woober blinked at her, mouth parting. "You planned to get caught?" Selene nodded once. Yes. The agreement was simple. She would kill Elira, but if she failed and was captured, she would remain silent until death. In exchange, every single member of her family would be taken care of. Forever. Everything they needed. She met each of their eyes with quiet finality. But if she talks, if she names me, every last member of her family will die. She knows that. Lord Woober glanced nervously at Makore, who let out a slow, controlled breath, settling back to his seat. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, they were like embers banking heat for later destruction. Across the table, the Queen remained unnervingly silent, her gaze fixed on Selene as she swirled her goblet slowly. Her eyes seemed to bore into Selene's very soul. When she did speak, her voice was low and deceptively soft. "You acted without my knowledge." Selene turned toward her. "Mother, The Queen raised a hand. Not to strike, but to silence. "Do not excuse it. You endangered the entire house. You endangered me." Her eyes deepened to a stormy darkness, her gaze piercing. "From this point on, you do nothing unless it is by my hand or my order. The next mistake will not be forgiven. Not by them. Not by me. Is that clear?" Selene bowed her head. "Yes, Mother." The Queen rose slowly, the folds of her dark gown trailing like shadows behind her. She walked towards the door, pausing only briefly. "I will handle the palace. You two—" Her eyes flicked to Makore and Woober. "Make sure no whispers slip through the cracks. If that maid speaks, we all hang." She disappeared into the darkness beyond, her footsteps silent. As the door shut, Selene sat motionless, the weight of what she had done settling fully onto her shoulders. Across from her, Lord Makore still sat, watching her as if measuring how soon she might become a liability. His voice was like a curse muttered under breath when he said, "If this plan of yours backfires, child, your mother's wrath will be the least of your concerns." He swept out of the room, his cloak hissing behind him like a serpent's tail. Woober followed afterwards. Finally alone, Selene let out a long breath, but it did nothing to ease the weight pressing on her chest. If the maid spoke, this game was over. The High Commander's quarters were cold, the air brisk, metallic, tainted with oiled steel and parchment. Maps lined the walls, spears stood upright in the corners, and a single heavy desk dominated the center. Behind it, Commander Senavi reviewed reports with her usual precision when the door opened. She looked up and straightened ever so slightly at the sight of Elira, veiled and cloaked in a deep blue hooded robe. "Elira," she said, "I assume you've come for an update on the investigation." Elira took a few steps forward, her voice calm but resolute. "I want you to release the maid." There was a beat of stunned silence. Then Senavi slowly stood. Her expression darkened like thunderclouds over a battlefield. "You want what?" "I want her freed," Elira repeated. Senavi's eyes narrowed. "Who's threatening you?" she asked, her voice suddenly sharper, protective. "Tell me and I'll handle it. Myself." "No one is threatening me," Elira replied, voice hardening. "This is my decision." Senavi stepped out from behind the desk, her armor catching the light, jaw clenched. "Absolutely not." Elira met her glare without flinching. "Why?" "Because it's foolish," Senavi snapped. "You do understand what she did, what she attempted to do?" she asked. "She tried to kill the heir to the throne. She tried to kill you. And you're standing here asking me to just let her walk out? You're just not thinking straight." "I am," Elira said, still calm, though her hands trembled slightly beneath her sleeves. "She's been in that dungeon for a month and 3 weeks, tortured endlessly. And still she says she acted alone. That means she's ready to die. That doesn't mean she's innocent. Senavi countered. It means she's dangerous and desperate. I'm not going to start my journey as a leader with shading of blood, Elira said, more softly now. I want something different, something better. Senavi's eyes flashed. You don't get to rewrite justice, Elira, just because your heart tells you to. I'm not asking, Commander, Elira added, her tone sharp now. This isn't a request. Her voice rose a notch. It's an order. A long silence fell. Senavi's eyes narrowed to slits. She stepped in close, too close, and the restraint in her posture was palpable. For a moment it felt as though the very room tensed. She stared at Elira, a slow burning storm behind her gaze. She didn't speak. Neither did Elira. The standoff dragged, until finally Elira sighed, her shoulders slumping in quiet defeat. I know you think I'm making a mistake, she murmured, but I've made up my mind. You can hold your sword against me if you want, but I won't change it. Senavi said nothing. Her stare was unreadable. What Elira didn't say, what she couldn't, was that Jobel had uncovered that days before the coronation, the maid's family had been visited and gifted by some men. Jobel had gotten this information from the maid's younger brother, who made him swear not to tell anyone. Even though she couldn't prove who sent these men to the maid's family, her heart whispered, the Queen. But if it was the Queen that sent the maid, who then had sent the assassin at the rooftop? Her thoughts were interrupted by the commander as she stepped away from her and walked back to her desk. Her voice was lower now, measured. Don't tell me you're like your mother. Elira looked up sharply. It was the first time the commander had spoken of her mother. What? But Senavi didn't repeat herself. She only sighed, circled the desk again, and stopped in front of Elira. I'll release the maid, she said slowly. Elira blinked. But, Senavi added, voice firm as iron, she will not walk free. My men will watch her like a hawk day and night. Where she lives, where she goes, who she sees, what she eats, every breath, watched. Elira nodded slowly, grateful but still solemn. I'll take it. Thank you. And I'm sorry for how I talked to you earlier. Senavi raised an eyebrow, then offered the faintest smile. No problem, Princess. It shows you've got fire. You'll need it. Elira turned to leave, but then paused. Jobel. Elira's mind flashed back to her last conversation with Jobel, a month ago, when he had given her that critical lead about the maid. He had informed her then that he would be answering Senavi's summon the next day, and since then she had been unable to reach him. She had even risked visiting his house but didn't see him. His mother had said he'd gone to visit family. But that was a lie. Elira knew Jobel would never leave without telling her. A sense of unease settled in the pit of her stomach as she wondered if Senavi was detaining him. She spun around sharply. Her voice was low but firm. Where is Jobel? Senavi, already seated again and flipping through reports, looked up. Her brow lifted ever so slightly. Jobel is safe. Don't lie to me. Where is he? Elira's voice rose, sharp and frightened. If you've hurt him, if you've laid a finger on him, I swear I'll become a storm in your path, Commander. That drew Senavi's full attention. She looked at her scrutinizingly, a glint of amusement, maybe admiration, flickering across her face. Princess, she said dryly, I've seen war, rebellion, a king's madness and a queen's wrath. Trust me, I've met worse than you. Please, Elira whispered now, desperation cracking through her voice. Just tell me, is he okay? Senavi's face softened, just barely. He's alive. That's not an answer, It's the only one I'll give you right now." Elira clenched her fists, rage boiling beneath the surface, but forced herself to stay calm. "Believe me, Princess," Sanavi said at last, a shadow behind her eyes. "Everything I'm doing is for your own safety." Elira scoffed and rolled her eye. "You're impossible." Sanavi smiled, seemingly enjoying her frustration. Elira turned, storming from the chamber, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. "That woman is a hard nut to crack," she thought bitterly. "And I'm going to have to work with her? Stars help me!" The throne room was quieter than usual. Not silent, never silent, but quieter, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. The State Council sat lined like blades, polished, poised, and dangerous, their masks of civility expertly worn. But beneath it all, Elira could feel it. They were watching, weighing, waiting. Just one misstep would be all it takes for them to devour her alive. She stood near the throne, her posture straight, the circlet of the crown princess resting on her head like a shard of ice, her veil drawn as usual, successfully covering her entire face. She didn't sit. Not yet. Her father's condition had worsened, too frail now to appear in court. Today she would speak for the throne. She took one final assessing glance at the royal councillors, and then took her seat on the designated heir's seat beside the king's throne. "Let's begin," she said, her voice clear and firm. Lady Tavora, Keeper of Records, stood and gave a quick bow. "Your Highness, we begin with the matter of the trade imbalance between the eastern river provinces and the central granaries. Reports have surfaced—" "Hold on," Elira interrupted. Her tone wasn't rude, but it was firm. Tavora blinked, then inclined her head and stepped back. Elira let the silence stretch. "Then, there's a more urgent matter, one that demands this council's attention, as it speaks to how justice is carried out in the name of the crown." A rustle of unease rippled through the chamber. "While walking through one of the markets here in the capital yesterday, I saw 2 officers from the tax bureau, bearing the seal of Lord Woober's office, beating a merchant. His offense? He questioned why he has to pay a certain tax twice. They broke his scales, scattered his goods, and when his wife pleaded for mercy, they struck her." A quiet murmur passed through the assembly. Lord Woober paled. His fingers twitched against the armrest, his golden rings catching the light like guilty sparks. "Your Highness," he began, voice uncertain. "Surely there's been a mistake. That sort of conduct, while deplorable, is not typical of my officers. Perhaps, are you saying I imagined what I saw?" The chamber froze. Woober's throat bobbed. No, of course not, Your Highness. If you say it happened, then it did. I was merely unaware. I will investigate the matter personally, and any official found guilty will be stripped of duty and dealt with harshly." Elira's gaze was unblinking as she looked at him. "Good. Make it public. Let the people see punishment, not promises." From the side, Lord Marcoret's deep voice chimed in, smooth as aged wine. "A bold stance, Your Highness, and necessary. Justice must be seen, especially in times like these." She offered no reply. "While we're still on the matter of unrest, I'm afraid matters in the southern province of Darai are beginning to spiral. Protests have swelled in the last 3 days, incited, it seems, by opposition to your ascension." His tone remained respectful, but the implication was clear. He was telling her to her face that she was the cause of unrest. "The governor has done all he can to calm the flames, but words alone won't douse rebellion. A gesture, a royal visit from the crown princess herself, your presence, could appease them. Let them know that crowning you heir was no mistake." Before Elira could respond, Commander Senavi spoke up, steel in her voice. You suggest we send the Crown Princess into a province currently boiling with unrest, where she'd be a visible target for every angry fool with a blade and a cause? Makore gave a tight-lipped smile. I suggest we act swiftly before unrest becomes insurrection. The people need to see their ruler. Presence has power. A ruler who hides behind walls invites rebellion. And a ruler who walks blindly into a riot invites death. Enough, Elira said, her voice cutting through like a clean blade. Both fell silent. She turned, facing the full chamber. If unrest rises because of me, then I will face it. Not from behind palace gates, but on the soil where the people walk. I will go to Darai. Your Highness, Senavi began, voice tight with resistance. You'll prepare the escort, Elira said firmly, not looking at her. Senavi's jaw clenched. Elira turned to her, her voice more gentle but firm. I trust you, Commander. I know you will keep me safe. A heavy silence followed. Then Senavi dipped her head, though her eyes burned. Yes, Your Highness. I'll prepare your guard and itinerary. Elira nodded. Do so. We ride in 3 days. Wise choice, Your Highness. Makore bowed slightly, a slow smile curving across his lips. Not approval, not admiration, but anticipation. As the meeting ended and the councillors filed out, Elira remained behind. She stood alone on the dais, one hand curled around the edge of the king's throne. She hadn't taken the throne, yet its weight had already begun to press down on her shoulders. The moon hung like a sliver, veiled in drifting mist. Shadows pooled beneath the trees. The wind whispered through the branches like secrets between ghosts. In the heart of the forest, 3 figures stood beneath the looming canopy. Elira, veiled and cloaked in black, stood still as stone. Beside her, High Commander Senavi stood rigid in her leather armor, hand resting loosely on the hilt of her sword. A few paces behind them, Rezu, her second-in-command, waited in silence, his stance mirroring Senavi's. Then came the muffled shuffle of boots. A group of soldiers emerged from the dark, leading a figure forward. The maid. Her steps faltered as she was led into the clearing. A rough sack covered her eyes, and her garments hung loose on her frame. Torn, stained, still reeking faintly of old blood and sweat. Her wrists were bound in front of her, but loosely, without true restraint. She looked shrunken, bruised, starved, but defiant. Rezu stepped forward. In one swift motion, he yanked the sack off. The maid blinked rapidly, her swollen eye twitching at the sudden exposure to moonlight. Her lips were cracked, one corner of her mouth still scabbed. She looked around slowly, and then her gaze settled on the veiled figure standing at the center. Elira. Recognition flickered across the maid's face, but no remorse, no apology. Only quiet defiance laced with weariness. If this is where it ends, she rasped, voice hoarse, then just get it over with. A long silence followed. Then Elira's voice, quiet and steady, drifted through the trees. Go. The maid blinked. What? I said go. Elira repeated. You're free. Confusion warred with disbelief on the maid's face. She turned her head, scanning the woods, eyes searching for hidden archers, blades in the dark, the cruel joke waiting to be sprung. There are no hidden soldiers, Elira said. No trap. Only your freedom. Still the maid didn't move. Senavi stood impassive, her arms crossed. Rezu didn't even blink. The maid finally took a hesitant step, half limping. Another step, eyes still flicking between them. Then she stopped and turned toward Elira again. I tried to kill you, she said flatly, and you're letting me walk away. Surely, there must be a price. There's none, Elira took a step closer, her veil catching a thread of moonlight. "You committed treason," she said. "But your blood won't be on my hands. You have one night. Use it well. Leave the capital. Go far where no one will find you." The maid stood frozen, the weight of it beginning to sink in. "But," Elira continued, "if you must, do see your family before you leave." The maid's breath hitched. "Your mother fell ill." Elira's voice softened. "She likely couldn't bear the weight of the rumors about you. Seeing you, even once, might help her heal." That single thread of humanity cut deeper than any sword. The maid looked down, her expression faltering just for a moment. Sanavi's voice sliced through the moment, sharp as flint. "Be extremely careful." She stepped forward, her eyes glinting beneath the shadows. "Her Highness has spared you, but those who sent you will not. You're a loose end. The moment they learn you're alive, they will come for you." The maid looked at her, then back at Elira, now truly shaken. And for the first time since her capture, her eyes filled with something else. Tears. Not of sorrow, but of disbelief, of survival, of undeserved mercy. She dropped to her knees and bowed low, lower than she ever had in her life, pressing her forehead to the damp forest floor. Her body trembled, whether from pain or gratitude, no one could tell. Then she rose, turned, and with one last glance back, she walked away from them. Her steps were light, her tears falling freely now. When her eyes were covered and she was led out of the dungeon, she had thought it was her last day on earth. She couldn't believe she would still see the next day. To be free. Though she didn't say it out loud, she knew, deep down, that she was forever indebted to the princess who showed her mercy. They watched her disappear into the shadows. No one spoke. Only when the last rustle of her movement faded did Elira finally let out the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Sanavi watched her from the corner of her eye. "You're a strange one, princess," the commander murmured. "Strange, but maybe what we need." Elira said nothing. "She won't forget." Sanavi continued, her voice low, unreadable. "Let's hope she doesn't make us regret it." "She already made peace with dying," Elira replied. "Someone like that doesn't waste freedom." The night closed in again, thick with secrets. The palace courtyard buzzed with quiet urgency. Horses were being readied, saddlebags inspected, soldiers assembling in tight formation. The morning air was edged with steel, crisp, laced with smoke and anticipation. Above it all, the sun strained through a thick veil of cloud, casting a pale gold hue over the cobblestones. Elira stood on the raised portico overlooking the preparations like a statue carved of shadow and resolve. Her hood drawn low, her veil fastened, her travel cloak heavy on her shoulders. The wind tugged gently at the hem of her robe, but her posture held firm, steady, composed. Behind her, the grand doors opened with a long, slow creak. Sanavi emerged, every inch the warrior, her sword at her hip, her posture proud. But she wasn't alone. Behind her walked a young man in full royal warrior attire. His posture was rigid, but his eyes, when they met Elira's, softened instantly. Elira froze, breath caught in her throat. "Jobel," she murmured. Sanavi came to a halt before her and gestured toward him. "Your Highness," she said crisply, "you'll be needing a personal guard on this journey." Elira's heart skipped. She looked at Jobel in disbelief, then back at Sanavi. Sanavi's expression was unreadable, her voice like iron shined to shine. This one was the first to see what others missed during the ceremony. He caught what trained eyes failed to catch. I requested his old application for enlistment. He'd been rejected once by paper pushers. I put him through my own trials, combat, tactics, loyalty. She looked at Jobel briefly, then at Elira. He passed them, better than some already in my ranks. Elira said nothing, trying to hold the swell in her chest at bay. Sanavi's voice lowered as she stepped closer to Elira, just enough so only she could hear. I know he's your friend. Probably more than a friend, but right now, Your Highness, you need someone willing to die before you fall. Loyalty born of affection is not a weakness, it's a shield. Elira gave a small, grateful nod, her voice just as low. Thank you. Sanavi stepped back, letting Jobel approach. He bowed deeply, gaze never leaving Elira's. Your Highness. Elira tilted her head slightly. You kept this from me. I wanted it to be a surprise, Jobel said. The good kind. She offered her hand, and he took it, pressed his lips to her knuckles. Not the stiff kiss of protocol, but something warmer. Something only they could understand. Before Elira could say more, Sanavi turned toward the gathered soldiers and raised her voice. Form up. You ride for Darai within the hour. Everyone stays sharp. No one relaxes until Her Highness returns. A chorus of, Yes, Commander, echoed from the soldiers, and they began falling into line. As Elira turned to leave the portico, she hesitated. Then he looked back at Sanavi. You won't be coming with us. Sanavi's jaw tensed. As you've ordered. Elira nodded solemnly. You'll be my eyes in the palace. Watch the council, and make sure the maid's cell stays as it was. Let them believe she's still there. A flicker of tension passed between them. Sanavi didn't like the plan, not even a little. I still think it's a mistake, she muttered. Let me ride with you to Darai. Maybe it's a mistake, Elira said, but it's the only one I can live with. Sanavi didn't argue further. She gave a single, sharp nod and stepped back. Elira smiled beneath the veil. Then she turned, and Jobel stepped beside her without a word. Together they descended into the courtyard, where their steeds awaited. As the gates opened and the road to Darai unfurled before them, Elira looked once over her shoulder. Sanavi stood at the top of the steps, arms folded, unblinking, already watching the palace as if it were a battlefield. She wouldn't be coming with them, but her presence would be felt, like a blade left in shadow, waiting. And with that, the crown princess and her retinue rode out toward Darai, toward unrest, toward fire, and into the unknown. The road to Darai twisted like a serpent through the cliffs and into the woods. The royal entourage rode under a sky dimmed by thick clouds. The breeze was sharp, howling through the trees like a warning. Elira rode at the center of the formation, flanked by Rezu and Jobel, their eyes constantly scanning. The guard was tight, alert, but not enough. The attack came without warning. A sharp whistle pierced the wind. A royal guard behind Elira dropped with a gurgle, an iron-tipped shaft through his throat. Chaos erupted. Ambush! Rezu barked, already off his horse, sword drawn. From the trees, black-cloaked figures burst forth like shadows peeled from the bark. Fast, trained, silent. They struck with curved blades and grim precision, each movement honed for lethality. Steel clashed against steel as the guards met the charge, forming a protective wedge around the princess. Elira dismounted in one fluid motion and drew the blade of the fallen guard. "Stay close!" Jobel shouted to her, intercepting one of the assassins mid-lunge. But Elira did not stay still. Her cloak flew as she turned, striking with precision. Her blade arced clean through the neck of the first assassin who charged at her. Blood sprayed in a sharp fan across the leaves. She turned, pivoting with surprising agility in her cloak. slicing another across the thigh and driving her sword into his gut before he could scream. One assassin stumbled back, startled. "She can fight," he muttered. The leader of the assassins growled at the others. "Take her down!" The soldiers rallied with her courage. Rezu fought like a wolf cornered, his blade a blur of speed as he carved through their enemies, protecting Elira's flank. Jobel fought hard. He was everywhere at once, his movements fluid and relentless. For a moment, it seemed the tide was turning. Then came the archers. Iron-tipped arrows rained from above, black shafts whistling down with terrifying precision. A guard screamed as one pierced his heart. Another fell beside Elira, blood soaking his armor. Bodies fell. Their numbers dwindled. Rezu turned to bark a command. An arrow slammed into his chest. He staggered, eyes wide in shock before collapsing to his knees. "Rezu!" Elira cried out, rushing toward him, but Jobel grabbed her hand. "Elira, come on!" Jobel began dragging her toward the tree line. She stumbled, resisting. "We can't leave them! There's no time!" He roared, as another volley of arrows cut down 2 more guards behind them. They fled into the trees as more arrows struck the dirt where they'd stood. The leader and 2 more assassins immediately gave chase. Branches tore at them as they fled. Behind, the assassins followed, fast, silent, merciless. "They're gaining!" Jobel yelled, pulling Elira, and they ran faster. But it wasn't enough. Suddenly, Jobel's body jerked as an arrow lodged in his shoulder. He stumbled, fell to one knee. "Jobel!" Elira dropped beside him, trying to lift him. He gritted his teeth, blood running down his arm. "Go! Go, now! I'm not leaving you. If you stay, they'll kill us both." His voice was strained, urgent. "You have to run, now!" "I can't." He shoved her. Her breath caught. "Please, Elira," he said softly, voice desperate. "Run. I will catch up. I promise." Tears stung her eye. Her body trembled with rage and fear, but she nodded. With one last glance, she turned down the wooded slope, branches whipping past her, heart thundering louder than her footsteps. Jobel staggered to his feet, watching her disappear into the trees. Then he turned the other direction and ran. Behind, the assassins split. 2 after her. 1 after Jobel. Jobel skidded to a stop, his shoulder screaming with every step. He leaned against a tree, blood soaking his side. Gritting his teeth, he snapped the arrow shaft, yanked it out. Blood gushed. He bit down a cry and wrapped a strip of cloth around the wound. Then he crouched low, disappearing into the underbrush, listening, waiting. The assassin came. He moved cautiously, too cautious, eyes scanning. As he crept past, Jobel burst up from the brush, blade flashing. Dodging the assassin's blade, he drove the sword straight through his ribcage. The man convulsed and fell. Jobel didn't wait. He yanked his blade free, turned and sprinted in Elira's direction. His lungs were burning, vision blurring. Elira ran until the ground dropped out from beneath her. She burst from the trees, only to skid to a halt at the edge of a cliff. Below, a black river twisted like a serpent, deep, fast, merciless. She turned to flee in the other direction. Too late. The assassin stepped from the trees, blocking her. One grinned wickedly. She raised her sword, shaking slightly from exhaustion, but standing tall. They circled, then lunged. The fight was brutal, primal. Elira's blade clashed with theirs in a fury of metal and grit. She dodged a strike, parried another. Her cloak tore, her boots slid against rock, but she kept her footing. She whirled and sliced cleanly through the neck of one assassin. He collapsed, gurgling. But the leader didn't hesitate. He used that moment to lunge at her. She turned swiftly at the sound of his movement, but it was already too late. His blade drove into her stomach. She gasped. The cold steel felt like ice. Her breath caught. Is this how it ends? Pain. Shock. The assassin twisted the blade. Then, behind them, Jobel burst from the trees like a storm. "Elira!" Jobel's roar resounded like thunder through the clearing. The assassin yanked the blade free and with a shove hurled Elira off the cliff. Jobel saw her fall, saw the crimson streak in the air, and something snapped inside him. The assassin lunged, swinging wildly. Jobel dropped to a knee, sliding under the blade's arc, dust and gravel flying, and buried his sword into the man's gut. Blood sprayed. He collapsed, twitching. Without wasting a second, Jobel ran and leapt over the edge. The wind tore at him. The roar of the river screamed in his ears. Below, Elira's body twisted in freefall. He reached for her, and they both disappeared into the dark waters below. The bells tolled again, low, deep, and mournful. Their echoes rolled over the capital like a heavy fog, settling on rooftops and winding through the streets like sighs. For the second time in weeks, black banners fluttered above the palace walls. The kingdom mourned, but not for Elira. The sky above Eldora was smeared in a weary grey, as if the heavens themselves mourned the quiet passing of the man who had once ruled it with stoic silence. King Harlan, father of the flame, had passed quietly 2 nights prior, his already fading health extinguished by the news of his daughter's death. Those closest to him knew the truth. He had not died because of old age or sickness. He had died of heartbreak. He had held on for weeks after hearing the news, waiting, hoping, even demanding, desperately, that the royal hounds dig through the rivers, the caves, the cliffs of Darai. "Bring me her body at least," he had whispered to Senavi, voice cracking under the weight of defeat. "Let me bury her with her name." But nothing came, only silence. And when hope left him, so did life. Elira was gone. The people, though clad in black for the king, wore something else behind their eyes. Relief. They didn't speak it aloud, not when guards were near. But in markets, under breath and between bargains, in tea houses and wine dens, it was there.
"At least the cursed girl is gone.
They say her body was never found. Good. Let the forest keep her."
It was rebellion, they say. Darai protested her rise. They killed her for it.
She brought unrest. Her death saved the realm from a war."
Weeks had passed since the assassination, and the wind still carried no word. Atop the palace's highest tower, Commander Senavi stood. Grief clung to her like sweat, her cloak heavy around her shoulders as she watched the city below, the black flags twisting in the wind. Her jaw was clenched tight, her knuckles pale where they gripped the stone ledge. At the Hall of Valor, Rezu's name had been etched into the memorial wall for fallen soldiers. His body had been found, pierced with arrows. His blood, dried on the blades of enemies unknown. She remembered the moment the news reached the palace. They'd told her it was over. Princess Elira's retinue was ambushed in Darai. Protesters overwhelmed them. The guards fought, but fell. The princess was slain. Senavi hadn't believed the story then. She didn't believe it now. An ambush by angry civilians? She spat under her breath, eyes narrowing. Protesters outfight Rezu? Elira taken by people with no training? Nonsense. She had swept the aftermath herself, combed the roads to Darai, read every report, and questioned every shadowed traveler. She had threatened smugglers, bribed grave robbers, and scouted for signs, but nothing. No witness, no trace, no corpse. She had even looked through Rezu's final battle marks, clean slashes, arrow wounds too precise, too clean for a mob. The cover-up was too perfect. Someone powerful had orchestrated this, and deep down she knew who or the people that had done it. But she had no proof, and without proof, she had no weapon. And until she found Elira, or found the proof to bring down those who planned it, Sanavi would remain exactly where Elira had asked her to be. Watching, waiting, digging. Because the game wasn't over. It had only just begun. She turned at the sound of movement behind her. A royal aide stepped into view, bowing low. "Commander, they've asked for your presence. The ceremony to crown Princess Selene, the Regent Crown Princess, has begun." The words felt sour in her ears. She nodded stiffly and descended from the tower. In the throne room, power was shifting. The royal councillors had assembled once more. The atmosphere was quiet, but charged. The dais was no longer empty. Princess Selene sat where Elira should have, on the heir's seat beside the empty throne. The Minister of Rights had just placed the circlet of regency on Selene. The silver band seemed to fit her perfectly, coiling around her brow like a serpent. "The throne shall not remain vacant," intoned Lady Tavora, keeper of records and royal decrees. "As dictated by the law of sovereign continuity, the role of regency shall fall upon the next royal heir for a period not exceeding 6 months." Heads nodded in agreement. The chief councillor stepped forward, voice sonorous and full of reverence as he declared the council's support. And by this law, in this time of grief and uncertainty, with the throne left empty by the passing of His Majesty the King, and in the prolonged absence of Princess Elira, whose fate remains unknown, we, the Royal Council, in wisdom and duty to the kingdom, do hereby instate Princess Selene as Regent Crown Princess. May she rule with clarity and resolve, until such a time as Providence restores certainty to the royal line. Selene smiled, soft and serene. But Sanavi saw it, the calculation behind her eyes, the triumph carefully veiled behind modest mourning garb. She didn't wear grief like a woman who'd lost a sister or a father. She wore ambition. The ministers bowed, some out of tradition, some out of alliance. "To honor the king," she said, "I take up the duties of the throne until the will of the gods is made clear. The search for my dear sister shall continue. We hope, we pray for good outcomes, but—" She paused, and her gaze swept across the council chamber, where Lord Makore and Lord Wuba listened like statues carved from secrets. "If Elira is not found in 6 months," Selene continued, "the law compels us to declare her dead, and the kingdom shall not be left rudderless." The chamber bowed again in quiet assent. Some murmured hope, most murmured fate. But Sanavi's jaw locked tight. She stood like a drawn sword behind the council. She bowed when custom required, but never lowered her gaze. She was always watching, observing even the tiniest detail. Selene caught her gaze but looked away. The timer had begun. 6 months. If Elira remained missing, the law demanded her be declared officially dead. And then Selene would be crowned queen. Even if Elira returned after that, she can no longer lay claim to the throne. By law, she would be nothing, a ghost in the kingdom she was meant to rule. In that moment, Sanavi made another vow in her heart. "You have 6 months, Elira. I don't know if you're alive, but if you are, find your way back. Crawl if you must, because if you don't, they will bury you in law and silk and crown one of the vipers responsible for your assassination." Outside the chamber, rain began to fall. And somewhere far beyond the palace gates, beyond mourning bells and coronation plans, a girl with a wound in her side and fire in her veins was still breathing. And the storm she carried with her had not yet begun.
You've just reached the end of The Cyclops Princess. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments section. I'll be reading every single one. And if you're excited for part 2, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you're the first to know when the next chapter drops.